Yeah, the last few days of the honey log wagon. I'm going to miss it, I think. I had one day in here having a shower and it was sort of, well, it wasn't pounding heavy rain, but it was raining down there and there was a bit of a blusty wind blowing and it was rocking it back slightly and I was having a nice warm shower and that was just fantastic. Yep, as they say, if you can't eat it, don't put it down the toilet, sort of thing. So, anyway, I just thought I'd give give you Dicktales from the honey log wagon. I've read through most of this book now, and I've already made this speech once before. The battery's ran, so you're going to have to forgive me if I sound a bit repetitive and a bit stilted. But yeah, I've gone through most of the book, and my biggest peeve, as I said, I don't want to try and be too negative, as I was saying on the last time I was making this. It's this Dione cultivar section. Where we go? It starts on 100 and, what was it, 34 or something, if I remember right now. 43, yeah, 143. So, and it goes all the way through to 300 and something other. 300 and, no, sorry. Yeah, I think 400 and something like that. I think it was 10 short, yeah. 400. Yeah, okay. 434 or 433, so it's basically 10 pages short of 200 pages. As you can see the thickness there. So, and there's a whole blank page there. So, you know, if 1,000 copies of this is going out, probably more, or 10,000 copies of this, there's, what, 10,000 blank pages there? I mean, if you've got 10,000 copies going on this, it's, that's 2 million, isn't it? If it was 1,000 copies and you got almost 200 pages, that would be 200,000 pages of the same stuff, basically. I mean, that's almost like a forest, isn't it? That's my pet peeve. Is it's almost like the maps out of the original Carnivorous Plants of Australia. You know, almost every other page had the same map on. Well, basically, that's the pictures are different, but the blurb very similar and very, well, I wouldn't say mundane, but you know, just matter of fact sort of thing. Roughly who discovered it or where it was discovered. Could almost be hearsay for all I know. I mean, is it documented? Have they got videos to back up what they're saying? You know, here's a video of the person discovering it in the shop back then. Probably didn't have digital cameras back then or something, if it is a true historical discovery. But the fact that most of these things have turned up since the days of tissue culture. Bought it in a shop. To quote Flanders and Swans or thing, yeah, I doubt that you bought it in a shop. It's more like it came out of the tissue culture flask. Well, you know, 40 years ago when I was starting off, yeah, well, what you basically only had, well, the tall sort of dilatatio Venus flytrap, that was basically something you heard about as like a fairy tale in Japan or something, you know. It was basically, you know, sort of almost like a fairy tale, you know. You may have seen pictures or something in Botanica or Exotica, but yeah. So that's my biggest peeve is, you know, basically 200 pages of this book is almost like a wasted forest in a way. Whether that was some part of a deal, you know, if I'm going to give you this, if I'm going to give you photographs of plants in the wild, you're going to have to advertise some cultivars for me or something. I don't know whether that's the way it went down. Anyway, back here we have the ecological section. Back here somewhere. Here we are. I don't know. If you haven't read Robertson Husting's, you probably think it's the bee's knees. But if you've read Husting's and that, it's basically roughly the same. But some of the relevant and salient points haven't really been transferred over across from Robertson Husting's, and some of the more subtler points probably take, you know, many readings and different variations of readings of the paper to actually, for the penny to drop something, and that sort of information really hasn't been transferred over. So basically the hobby from the ecological point of view hasn't moved on from there. So but if you haven't read Robertson Husting's, you'll probably get a bit of a kick out of it anyway. Well, though I would suggest you do actually read Robertson Husting's and read it many times and at different speeds and all sorts of things. So anyway, but having said that, I'm trying not to be negative, but there's all these, as I said, there's all these blank pages, as I said on the previous video, that didn't actually make it to the card. Something like, was it this one or something further on in here or something? Oh, another one there too. You could actually have a photograph on there or something like maybe a soil trench showing the soil or something like that, or a landscape photograph showing, you know, a massive Venus flytraps in the front here and maybe some Sarracenia flower in the background or something, you know. So every time you open the book you'd have a nice picture or something, but and at the back here there's about like 6 or 7 pages, I mean, of blank pages, you know. If you're gonna advertise your books, why don't you advertise them all, sort of thing? Maybe that's why they've been left blank, because maybe the book came out before all the other books have come out. I don't know, given the benefit of the doubt, sort of thing. But as I said, and what about the wide margins? You know, oh, see another blank page. So basically, you're buying blank pages and something. Another blank page. I don't like that sort of thing. And with the wide margins, maybe you could have had the spread it out a bit more. And some of these other things, as I said on the side here, as I was saying on my previous video, wherever they were, some of these in the index pages, you know, blank spaces like that, you could have a photograph in there or something like that, you know. So, you know, if you're going to plug out the same book over and over again, have something worthy that, otherwise it's just, you're selling blank paper to people. You're getting people to buy blank paper, in other words. And if you're going to have something that's going to sit in the library for the next 200 years, well, at least have something in the side there that's going to make it worthy. Otherwise, you're just putting blank paper into the libraries of the world, sort of thing, and people's personal libraries at home and things like that, you know. And then I went on to talk about Slack 1 and 2, and I was saying, you know, I can even remember, like, is it Jane Gate or something? I can remember the name of the photographer, because even though she took some black and white photographs, they were so good that I actually remember the person's name. Whether they talk about colorization, whether some of those photographs could be colorized, or whether the black and white purists will say, oh, that's terrible, it's anathema, you shouldn't colorize black and white photographs, you know. But then again, I think maybe some of them may have been in colour originally, sort of thing, because there are some of her photographs that are also in the book in colour, sort of implying that maybe the black and white photographs are actually in colour. Especially some of those lovely Bonata ones, the Staghorn ones, you know. There's a lovely one on there, and one of them is in colour and one's in black and white. And I think, oh, if only the black and white one was it's the same quality if it was in colour, and I'm assuming it probably was, but it was just back in those days that maybe they could only afford so many colour photographs. But these days, you know, so whether from the proceeds of all this sort of effort, the Slack 1 and 2 particularly, because not too many people have got Slack 2, Adrian Slack number 2. I've read it, sort of thing, but I wish I, in hindsight, had a personal copy of it myself. Whether 1 and 2 could be combined into like Adrian Slack 3, and maybe some of the black and white photographs either colorized, or you can track down the original coloured what is assumed to be colour photographs that were just transferred into the book in black and white. whether more information could be padded out. Maybe some of this, like this historical stuff on these other people, you could give one a nice historical section on Adrian Slack. What happened to him? What really happened to him? I mean, you know, why does he look so healthy in some of the CPN, Current Spark newsletter, the international one? There's like a CPN from the middle to late 90s or something, giving like a historical retrospective of Adrian Slack, and he looks healthier then than he did before he supposedly, I mean, in quotes, had a stroke, Yes, I don't know. Just personally myself, I just feel it's a bit suspicious that someone can look much healthier than, like 20 years after they've had this thing, they actually look younger than they did 20 years ago. Supposedly after they've had a stroke, and I think, something doesn't quite add up there. Something, either that or I want to know what drugs he's on, because I want some of them myself. Because if they're that good, I shouldn't be poo-pooing them, or to-pooing them. A hard joke there. Anyway, so I'm trying not to be negative, but basically, my biggest peeve is the 200 pages of basically, I don't know, 200 pages of advertisements for cultivars or something. I mean, but most of the blurb is very similar. Someone bought it in a shop. Yeah, right. You got 200 pages of more than 200 cultivars sort of thing in there. Yeah, you like 200 bought it in a shop or found it somewhere occurred. I think they basically, most of them have come out of tissue culture jars, but anyway, it's the result of 20 or more years of tissue culture sort of thing. And they seem to be getting more and more rapid now, and you could probably equate that to the way the various forms of capes and the various forms of Venus flytraps have gone almost parallel. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that. First it was white cape, it was like an all green Venus flytrap. Then we had red cape, red Venus flytraps. Then we had little capes, little flytraps, minimissima, and then we had giant cape, giant XL or B52. They've almost gone on like parallel train tracks of capes and flytraps. And yet capes are supposed to be so easy to grow and flytraps are a bit harder to grow, and yet you've got red capes that don't stay red. Basically, most people don't have trouble with them, and you've got red flytraps that don't stay red, so there's parallels there. I mean, am I asked, or are there actually direct relationships between the way capes have evolved over the last 20 or 30 years and all this sort of really developed in the 90s sort of thing, so I don't know. Yeah, so whether it's all just one big Konski, I don't know, but yeah. Okay, I suppose it's another book in the library, but am I ever going to keep... It's not like Adrian Slack one, you keep delving into it, and every time you read it, and it's almost like the original black and white CPNs, you can always reread them, and you always get lots of extra joy out of them, and things like memories and all that sort of thing. Whether this... I don't think this fits into that category sort of thing. Anyway, this year, basically, 2014... got some Sarracenia growing in, no peat, no coir, no sawdust, just basically formulation and quartzite sand, with a bit of charcoal on the top, mainly for rain splash. We didn't have any rain, or I had to have them under some sort of covering, wouldn't need the charcoal. Got sterility, no growth in that. I suppose that's just basically step one, isn't it? And the next step, I have made some further discoveries. So, we're going to go, hopefully, keep going back and back and back and back to this. The same way I've been going with the formulation until we push it on through. Either reach out into the future and drag you back into the present, or we just go out there and get it, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. It's not bad for 6 months' work, is it? Getting sterility, no laminar flow, no autoclave. You just make up the formula and it stays sterile. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to probably put this up as a bit of one of the Christmas specials, but you know, I thought I'm going to miss the honey Log-WAGON, so I thought, you know, I'd better make a Dicktales from the honey Log-WAGON, because even though it probably seems to be a bit negative, and also it's not as good as the first time I made it, because it's always the way, you know, your batteries run out of something and you have to basically try and say everything you said before, and it never comes out the same way as it never rolls off the tongue the way it did the first time. It never does. You know, things you think of in the original order, you can never put them all back, put the jigsaw back the way it happened the first time, sort of thing. But anyway, I hope I don't seem to be too negative, but you know, my biggest peeve in that book is the 200 pages of, as I said in the previous one, which I don't think I've mentioned, is why couldn't that have been put up on a website? You know, that section, the 200 pages. So you're just burning electrons, basically. You're not cutting down forests to do that, you know, because if there's 1,000 copies of that book sent out, if there's 10,000 copies of that, that's 2 million pages, you know, 2 million pages or something. That's a lot of pages. I'm sure that got to be a few trees anyway. I don't know how many pages you get out the pulp of a standard pine tree or whatever they're using these days for the pulp, but I'm sure someone out there in the pulp industry knows the ratio one tree equals how many pages. I suppose maybe I should Google that and see if there is if anything comes back, you know, how many pages of a standard book these days come from one tree, and then we can work out how much of a tree that one book is, and how much of a tree is, you know, 1,000 books, 10,000 books. And really, should we have that section of the book, since it's always going to be the same, up online? And maybe the photographs up online would be slightly better. I don't know. I mean, I've noticed some of those photographs in the file, they're very good transfers, but I think some of the Bradar or Richard Bradley or Bradley Richard in there are slightly better online than they are actually in the book. Most of them are very good transfers. I could say almost 99%, you know. But there's the odd one in there. I've actually reckoned the quality of the JPEG online is, one, it's slightly bigger, and two, the colour definition I think is slightly better online. But having said that, most of the photographs are very, very well reproduced in there. Anyway, so my synopsis so far of that, I haven't really learned, apart from the historical things. You can always learn new historical things. I haven't learned any new ecological information from that. So basically, yeah, I don't know. Make of it what you will, I suppose. But I'm trying not to be negative, but I was really somewhat pissed off by the 200 pages of cultivars. It's almost like an advertisement, with all the blurb being basically the same sort of stuff. You bought it in a shop? Paraphrase Flanders and Swan, you know. Yeah. How many sports and things can you actually accidentally come across at a nursery or a shop or something post 20 or 30 years of tissue culture? Yeah, I mean, it has one scratching one's head anyway. Anyway, over and out. This has been a long clip, and it's going to take a long time to upload, but I'll upload it as a Christmas special, I think. If I do get out to do any more Christmas specials, what with all this work and stuff we've had done. But anyway, hopefully 2015 will be quite an interesting year. But I've got a few things going over there, and if they pan out in the next 2 months, we might get a few surprising results. You know, that old theory that raised some ugly merit, I've gone back and I've made quite an interesting discovery. Yeah, so if it pans out next 2 months, just before Christmas time, yeah, I might have a few interesting JPEGs going up online. Have a few people scratching their heads. But if you're into cyanofider, because you know cyanofider is not as easy to grow as you think it is, and I think I found out the reason why it's harder than you think it is to grow. Yes, it's quite an interesting discovery. I emailed Gideon saying I made a very interesting discovery. So yeah, and it's very relevant to CPs, of course. And what I've been saying in the past, you know, I've even surprised myself. So yes. Anyway, over and out for now.